All right. Well, while we wait for people, I'll just go ahead and introduce everyone and welcome you all to this webinar. The topic for today's webinar is a super critical one beyond traditional models, new signals for driving student connection and yield. And so what does that mean in practice? We all know higher ed has invested so much in optimizing workflows and outreach to students and automation. Now with AI, there's even more conversations that are happening around how to automate who we talk to, how we talk to them, and when. But we also do know that no matter how sophisticated our action can be and our outreach, if the signals that trigger that outreach aren't great or they're lagging, there's only so much impact that we can have. And so today's conversation is really understanding what that foundational kind of layer should be of data and signals that can really move the needle so we can make sure that we're optimizing around today's realities and not yesterday's problems by chasing signals that maybe are a little stale or not as accurate. So we have an amazing group of panelists here that we're so excited to chat a little bit more with. Before we introduce them, I'll just introduce myself for those of you who I don't know, although I do see so many awesome familiar names in the chat. But my name is Carolina Recchi. I'm one of the two co-founders of EdSights, co-CEO, started EdSights about 7 years ago with my sister Claudia, who we co-lead and co-run the company together. It's been an incredible journey. And just for those of you who aren't as familiar with EdSights, we're really helping institutions engage with students using AI in a more proactive fashion. So we're proactively checking in with accepted students over text message, and we've built a framework that allows us to analyze conversations and translate those conversations into what we call student voice intelligence. So insights on how students are feeling and what their barriers are while they're in the funnel. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paul, who I'll also give him a big shout out because Paul was our number one customer at EdSights. Fun fact. So back in 2018, when we started the company, he was the first very brave institution who decided to take the leap of faith. And here we are today, 300 institutions later. So with that intro, Paul, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Carolina. The Recchis are sketchy. That's what I've always thought from the beginning. But yes, again, Paul Orscheln, right now serve as the Vice President for Enrollment Student Services at Park University, basically in the suburbs of Kansas City. The reason I got into this field, I think a lot of us that at least came up through the admissions route kind of fell into it. I done my undergraduate, my master's degree. I started a PhD in exercise physiology, thinking I was going to teach back in the 1900s, late 1900s, but 1900s nonetheless. Decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. So went back to my alma mater. They had an admissions counselor job open. I didn't know what that was, but it sounded kind of fun. And so I jumped into that, kind of had a knack for it, and worked my way up from there. Had a great enrollment manager I worked for. This was when I was at the University of Central Missouri by the name of Matt Melvin, who's at Penn State right now, and kind of showed me the light to what this career path, not only can do for yourself, but for students. And at the end of the day, I think we're all here for the same reason, and that's to see students be successful. So that's why I remain in this field.
Amazing. Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Justin. And actually, Paul, I forgot to ask, but thank you for remembering. When you introduce yourself, if you could share what drew you to enrollment management and what led you to stay and kept you here, that would be great.
Cool. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Good to see everyone attending the call. I'm Justin May, Chief Enrollment Management Officer, Richard Bland College in Virginia. And I actually manage all verticals for the entire student life cycle. So from inquiry awareness, dual enrollment, traditional enrollment, all the way through advancement, everything pretty much but facilities and academics. So what I came in a non-traditional way over to higher education, really came from startups, then started in private sector higher education, saw a huge opportunity, really transform traditional enrollment processes, which I consider to be very outdated when looking at traditional B2C processes. And really in moving into it, especially on the state side, the goal was to just create more mutually beneficial processes really reducing a lot of the stress and anxiety that I feel like is filled with students as they are approaching what could or should be such a defining moment that they'll talk about for years, and also aligning their expectations or their buying expectations for the journey to our journey as well too. What's kept me in enrollment management? This may sound cheesy, but I mean, I love being a part of helping people achieve their goals. I work in a 2-year, and I like being able to believe in somebody sometimes before they believe in themselves, ultimately help them, change the trajectory for generations to come. And at the end of the day, I love being the revenue engine for an organization.
Awesome. Tom, your turn.
Thanks, Carolina. Thanks, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Tom Nesbitt, Vice President for Enrollment Management, Clinton Community College, right up on the Canadian border in upstate New York, smallest community college in the SUNY system. My background is over 30 years in enrollment. I've been doing it across the SUNY system. Much of that work has been done within SUNY. Really exciting to talk about this topic today. And I think one of the things that got me into enrollment management was, like Paul, I had that supervisor who just lit the fire. They wanted us to figure out, we did all kinds of contests and how many inquiries we were going to get, how many apps, what's our yield going to be, how many registrations are we going to get, how many people at orientation. And it just kind of lit the fire and made you wonder what was possible. In that first year, I thought so much about it. I said, well, if I want to stay in the role, I need to get another degree. So I crossed back over into residence life, which is where I had a lot of experience in my undergrad days, got my graduate degree as a hall director, did one more stint in student affairs orientation, and then back to admissions, which was my love. I've stayed there for over 30 years. And I really feel like the reason I stay, much like Paul, much like Justin, that's student success. You just can't beat the opportunity to really make an impact. And especially being at a 2-year community college and a small one at that, you walk in our main building, take a right, you take the next right, and you're in my office. And to have students coming into my office just to chat, to sit, to just be around and get the help that they need to be successful. I think that community college environment just fosters that, and I love being a part of it every day.
Amazing. Love to hear that. Well, thank you for the intros, and we can jump right in from here. So the first part of this conversation is going to be focused on signals, since that's the topic for today. So I'll open with a kind of a broad question, but I'm curious, obviously a lot of the work that you all do revolves around managing students to deadlines, educating them on what those key dates are, reminding them what the steps are, the checklist, the big milestones, the nudging. I'm curious from you all, what are some of the most powerful enrollment signals that have indicated to you that a student is really struggling or disengaging, and at what point do you act on those signals?
Yeah, I can jump in here.
That'd
So
be great.
we track a lot of signals, and you mentioned this in your intro, is some new, some old. Click and engagement data, which has been around forever, but not everyone's actually looking at click and engagement data when it comes to SMS, email, how long they're staying on an email, and it really shows where the student's spending their attention. So we track that click behavior, the email open cadence, the stage velocity itself. We track if engagement drops. So all our prospects, they come into the CRM with an engagement score, and it really tracks how they're engaging with our content. So if there's a shift in score, it's going to prompt an engagement call with their counselor to uncover the actual stall itself. So it's like, if they're moving along with their cohort, then all of a sudden they're not, then there's an underlying concern that needs to be kind of smoked out. So that's why it's elevated to their counselor. Some, no movement. No movement is also a signal as well too. That could be like an unsurfaced objection. So a lot of times, if a student applies and starts the application and then stops, some schools assume, all right, they're just disengaged, they're going to go elsewhere. But we see it as a flag, an underlying concern that needs to be answered. So that also gets flagged and shot up to a counselor as well too. So we can address more the emotional side of the process itself versus the logistical, submit your transcript, et cetera. And then now, of course, with chatbots and agents, we're looking at what are they asking these chatbots? How are they interacting with these agents? Because we have found the data that we're getting from there is much more informative than, say, survey data. So these questions, the questions they ask shows us immediately what's top of mind and what they're uncertain about. So it helps us inform how to be proactive into the future. And then another big one for us is going to be like stage velocity outliers. If you've got different personas and you've got a student moving through, say, 30% slower than their peer cohort, it means something may be blocking them. And now, again, like I stress all this to say, like, a lot of these are just indicators. One may just be like a signal and may not mean anything, but really what we look for are clusters. So if there's a student tracking through with multiple things or several of these levers are popping up, that's going to force an intervention on our end.
I was going to ask just a quick follow-up on that. Do you, and you sort of answered it, do you then mandate or create guidelines around outreach expectations? And is that for every single, or is it prioritized based on like certain signals get a higher priority or a combination of signals?
Yeah, good question. So every relationship we have from app sub is required within 24 hours to have human contact. If we don't get within follow-up within 48 hours, then it goes into be nurtured through an AI agent. But anything is escalated if it's outside of like we've educated the agents on how to escalate an actual phone conversation or a record based upon the interaction itself, a stall, a friction point, an objection I'm concerned with, a financial aid email opened up 3 times and them not moving forward. It's a flag as well too.
Awesome, thank you. Tom or Paul?
Yeah, just a few things to add. Obviously, agree with everything Justin has mentioned here. Looking when you're tracking those interactions, not just the quality of the interactions, but the time between the interactions is also a good indicator when you're looking at inactivity to trigger some outreach. And just to reemphasize the understanding why that a student is disengaging, which is different for every student. And I think the tools that we now have at our fingertips through AI-powered predictive models, things like that, allow us to get to the why, so we can have those more personal communications. We can hopefully intervene before disengagement becomes permanent, which I think is the why. And to me, my experience, they stop engaging many times because there are these barriers that they come up against, whether that's a technical type of barrier or financial barrier. So if you can provide that personalized support and that relationship building at that phase and show them that you're invested in their success, I think that's when we become the most effective. So combining that data-informed decision making with the high touch kind of relationship-centered engagement.
I think we've covered that question pretty well. So I'll let you go on to the next question, Carolina.
Awesome. Well, the next question you touched upon a little bit. I mean, all of you here today have, a few things in common, but one of them is that you partner with EdSights, and so you're listening to students at scale, right? You're having conversations with every single student in the funnel using AI, and you're able to surface sentiment in that funnel. And I'm curious from you all, is there anything that has surprised you, or what do students say that enrollment teams weren't expecting to hear, or maybe is a little surprising when you start listening to that student voice at scale the way the 3 of you do?
I think starting off on that one, one is how honest they are with the bot. I was chatting about this morning with representatives from SUNY System Administration. They were like, well, did students really communicate with the bot? Did they talk to the bot? And we've really found that they're very honest. And what they've also found is they've seen from their responses, they've seen us react. Not that they went all the way to human interaction, but from their interaction with the bot, the institutions reacted. So that's encouraged them to interact more with the bot. When we get through it, when we look at our data through the whole process, 95% of our interactions with our EdSights bot are handled by the EdSights bot. And we're just listening and making decisions, whether that be policy or decisions on programming or decisions on communication next steps based on that information. But that 5%, that gives us the ability to take the tool that we're using through EdSights and spend more time with those students who really need that time to take away those barriers, to be able to move along the system, which we all are very blessed to be able to do.
So Carolina, and this was more about like what students say enrollment teams weren't expecting to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that
Yeah.
surprised you or
Yeah. I kind of interpreted this a little bit differently, and look at it from like what we perceive as what they want versus what they actually want. And I think a lot of colleges expect students, want like they're going to ask about curriculum, accreditation, job placement. Yeah, those common features are important, but it comes down to, can I do it? Can I afford it? Will I fit in? And schools are spending so many dollars and so much of their enrollment messaging on program differentiation and very little on actually belonging and support. And a second is really that students nowadays throughout their digital experiences are comparing us to all their digital experiences, not just other schools. So how fast that we respond to these inquiries is viewed how much we care about the actual relationship itself. How seamless is the application process? What's the website experience like? Students expect colleges to mirror their other digital experiences. And I think in doing that, it meets them where they're at and builds that trust and loyalty. And then lastly, for us, which was huge, was the non-college identities are really growing. I think what we saw is the traditional student that just went to college and solely was able to focus on school is shrinking. Far more students are juggling constraints outside of college, especially in the 2-year space. We at Richard Bland, we're seeing a lot more students take on roles outside of that traditional student. So like caretaker, working full time to be able to provide, to the financial makeup of the house. And a lot of that impacts the front end conversations, needs, goals, values, concerns, and also how we market to them as well, too.
yeah, I think trust is, and like on how open students are is definitely something that surprises folks, to Tom's point. And then just we think we know, what we know, and then you hear from students, and sometimes it aligns, and sometimes it doesn't align, and that's so helpful to know when it comes to our messaging, our marketing strategy, and what we're sharing back with them. We got a question in the chat that I'd love to share with this group. Someone was curious, like, at what point does the conversation go from interacting with the AI to human contact? And is it a certain number of touch points? Is it a certain type of touch points with your teams? Like, at what point does a human step in?
So I'll speak just from my school. So we have, and I mentioned this to you before, like I designed a framework called the human sandwich. And essentially the emphasis is on that human touch. A relationship should be built by the human and the AI should support it. So in a nutshell, the goal would really be to have the AI sending reminders, appointment reminders, a follow-up, schedule your orientation, whether there's any of those high value calls, those concerns, objections, family conversations, congrats, you're admitted. Those conversations are all human. And so based upon so I have another framework built into ours called the NBA, the next best action. And with that as well too, it informs the AI based upon the question or how they're interacting, when to route it to their actual counselor for a human conversation, and it provides context as well.
Carolina,
I don't know if that answers your question.
That there was a second part to that question I think I saw pop up about, does the relationship grow with the amount of time that you're exposed to the bot? Was that the second question that came in there?
Yeah. Have you seen it change from start to current use?
Yeah, I think this is my third institution using this kind of technology, and what I have seen is the answer to that is yes, from the standpoint of, we talked about building trust, and the students get used to this being part of their educational experience and a resource for them to go to themselves. Yes, we push messages, but they can push back with messages too. I think, which is a pretty robust feature of using the strategy. And what's really going to be interesting now that we have the yield module along with the retention module, those of us who are using both of those to see how strong that relationship gets between student and bot, from the time they're just an admitted student till the time they're navigating right on our college campus with the same, if you will, the same interface. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that strengthens things. And just one more point, that it's interesting, when I brought these on at my institutions, the first piece of pushback we always get is that we're depersonalizing these processes, when if you were to ask the students who engage in it, it's becoming a more personal interaction with the institution, and they can develop relationships quicker and sometimes deeper with the combination of Sir George, which is our chatbot, and then our actual staff who work side by side with them. So pretty exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, to Justin's point, I think everyone here agrees that the goal is certainly not to replace a human interaction, but to kind of open the door, if you will, in some cases. And in some cases, take on the more transactional work so that the admissions counselor can do the more life happens, fears, hesitation, fit type conversations, and not have to go through the checklist and the more logistics items. And then in other cases, it's, the AI can help you find the why and who needs help, but then the human is the one who's like solving the problem. But at least your humans are not spending time looking for the challenges and asking those very open-ended questions to see, how each student is feeling, and they know exactly how each student is feeling, and they can go very targeted and actually have more personalized conversation. So I completely agree with both.
Really
Um,
is meeting the
yeah,
student where they are to get them to where,
yeah.
where we'd like them to go or where they'd like to go. And I think that's the nice thing about this is they have choices. And along the way, we're there every step of the way to help them in a manner that they appreciate it.
For sure. And I think sometimes it's easier, there's things that you may not think of sharing. Like you may have a hesitation, maybe your boyfriend is far from home, or you have a job and you're worried about finding a new one, or whatever your hesitation is, that you may not think of, oh, I'm gonna proactively call my counselor and share this with them. But if someone is asking you and it's, over text message and it's easy, then it's a lot easier to open up. And then you get that phone call from the counselor. But the hardest part of sharing the challenge has been done. Um, I'm
Yeah.
curious, go ahead, Justin.
No, I just wanted to build on that. I think Paul made a good point. And, with AI supporting these relationships, I feel like a lot of students, Gen Z and then Gen Alpha, really growing up in the midst of AI and being used to it, having a faceless technology, it removes judgment. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
times a kid that's 18, 19, 20 years old is scared to go to an adult of title and say, hey, X, Y, and Z, and there's that fear of judgment. So by having a passive means or a means to be able to bounce this off
Hmm.
an AI, it kind of removes that, and then it escalates as needed and allows us to step in. So that's where we've seen great success with EdSights and really getting. And I know you're going to ask this later, but getting these like some model students who are appeared on the surface as model students and essentially really had issues that we needed to help out with.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Leads me to my next question, which is I'm curious if you could share any examples where um, using, a survey, EdSights, whether it's another kind of similar tool, you've had an interaction with a student, and through that student voice, you've been able to change how you approached that student conversation, or maybe even that broader cohort that student was in.
Got a pretty textbook example of that. It's from our initial implementation in 2018. So on the retention side, when we were honestly just getting going within the first month of launching this pilot, there were some questions that were going out to the students, obviously regarding their experience on campus. Are you having issues with your roommate? Any other concerns like that? And we had a student raise their hand, indicating that they were having significant conflict. That's not how they phrased it, but significant conflict with their roommate. Were considering dropping out, and this was within the first 6 weeks of school. And so, because of how we had this deployed, obviously our residents' life folks were part of this, the integration of EdSights on our campus. But we were able to immediately get the RA involved in the situation. They were able to have conversations with both students. You come to find out the RA or no one else in Res Life knew that there was this conflict going on with these two individuals. So rather than wait for the issue to escalate, like sometimes they do, we were able to jump on it as soon as we knew it, because that student was comfortable sharing with the bot they were having issues. Obviously, they weren't sharing that with anybody else. So long story short, couldn't really come to a resolution with those two in the same room, but we were able to move one to a different different living situation, and from all things I know, everything worked out quite well with that. So resolving that kind of conflict that happens much more than we're ever aware of. I think right there, again, 2018 is when we were doing this. That interaction right there was like, I'm sold on using this kind of technology to help students with their college experience.
Yeah. We have a little bit of a different experience, and one I was actually surprised at based on the results. So just like Paul and Tom, I don't know if you're using both, but we use the retention and admit modules as well. And we ran a retention campaign, and it flags like several of our high performing commuter students for belonging. And on the surface, like these were model students, high GPA, good attendance. They were work study students in enrollment management. So from the surface, it seemed like, oh, nothing's wrong. They're going to float by. They're going to graduate. They're going to move on. But after speaking with them, we identified like the events designed for students felt like they were created for our residential students and not the commuter students. So it was creating that disengagement, and we were at risk of losing them. So based on that, we were able to use a lot of that feedback, because 60% of our students are commuter students. So it was probably impacting a larger pocket than we had anticipated. But just from that data alone, we would have never received, because these were students were type A, type B. They were individuals that really weren't going to voice their concerns. They were going to move along, follow the rules, and probably eventually just disappear. But this was able to surface that information out of them.
I think like both campuses, we've had similar results. I think about it from the standpoint of the financial services side, and how we've had students that when we first got the product, students were coming to us talking about having to leave because financially, they're telling the bot, financially, I can't afford to be here. So much so that each year we've increased foundation dollar support so that we can help students on. Make sure that they're able to continue on and be retained and eventually graduate. So that's been fun.
Awesome. Next question is a little broader. So I'm curious, with all the hype, as you all know, that is around AI and enrollment right now. I think out of like AI in general, there's so much hype about, but when it comes to enrollment especially, I feel like enrollment is really pioneering in many ways the use of AI, at least that's what we're seeing at the institutions that we work with. And so I'm curious, in your experience, is AI actually moving the needle with your teams? And then what areas is it able to move the needle on? And then which areas are you, okay, this is more of a promise, but it's not really happening just yet. We're just not there with the technology. If you could share just some examples of either, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I can go. I think there are a number of areas where AI has really moved the needle. For instance, we hit on this earlier, the digital twins that we have within our human sandwich, the human AI human, which really helps us identify signals at scale. It's hard for a traditional counselor to come in and be able to identify 1,000 different signals from their caseload. So it allows, the AI identifies those signals and surfaces those. I think the hyper-personalized nurture journeys. So if everyone can think of like a segment of one instead of like the traditional segment of students that has similar characteristics. So you're getting that hyper-personalization, which helps build a little bit more affinity for the school they're applying to. the overall administrative load it's drastically helped. Mass quantities of files, it eliminates a lot of that from the counselors. I think one thing that a lot of schools need to realize, at least we did as well too, is that you need to reallocate time that's saved and push that back into high ROI activities. Because if not, the admissions counselors would just revert back to what they were doing, like reviewing emails, sending emails, etc. So it's really looking at changing job descriptions and potentially KPIs and what you're looking at. I would say where it's falling short, where a lot of companies lead with, AI is definitely not a relationship builder. There's more promise there than anything. And we talked about this a few questions ago. Like, I think humans should create the relationships and AI really should be there to help support it.
I would say a big needle mover, if you will. When we're talking about successful enrollment, and we focus a lot about on communications, obviously, but it's less about increasing the volume of communications and more about increasing the relevance of the communication. So again, just reiterating what we've all said here, but knowing more about what's happening with each individual student, because we're able to mine this kind of data from them, helps us have the relevant conversations, and which leads into your hyper personalization and everything else that we've mentioned. So, I mean, I think that's to me, one of the biggest pieces to this. Also, helping frame the work for our admission staff, and I think Justin mentioned that, but when you're dealing with thousands and thousands and thousands of prospective students and admitted students, it can be hard to sift through the noise, and this definitely helps sift through the noise. From a promise, what is it? What are we over promising? To me, I shouldn't say this, but I don't try to put any limitations on things at the moment. Yes, it's never going to be the living person. I don't think with the emotions and the things that come, but I probably shouldn't even say that. So, I'm going in this with eyes wide open, and where I just in general on our campus, the biggest rubbing point is how do we use this on the academic side and effectively like that. So what's helpful is, educating my friends in academic affairs about what it's doing for students in a recruitment and from a retention standpoint. So to build the trust, to be able to lean into the technology.
Yeah, one thing that we've also noticed is I think AI can help you scale process and initiatives and workflows, but if those processes are broken or there's no best practice for it, or there's no guidelines for it, it's either you're not going to be able to scale them because the AI does need some directions and guidance, or it could scale something that's broken, right? So I think the kind of figuring out what is our process or our ideal flow, and then plugging AI into it, as opposed to hoping that AI will do the initial part, has been really key for our partners. I see one question for Justin in the chat from Brittany. When the agent or bot reaches out to a student, have you seen positive results, or have some students shown frustration that they're being reached out by an agent? And if there's other folks that want to chime in, please do. But I'll let Justin go first.
Yeah, we're in the midst of about a 2-year journey with agents, so we've learned a lot through trial and error. In the beginning, we used to lead with AI, and we found that was a no-no. Students don't like that. So back to the whole starting any relationship with the human touch, it's got to be the human. The way we've got it now, again, it's just there to help support the relationship. So they're getting hyper personalized emails, nudges, follow-ups based upon the application data and things that we get. And within our application, we've added some additional questions to help give us insight to concerns, goals, and things of that nature to help tell us essentially why the student's there and what could prevent them from moving forward. So it allows us to get ahead of a lot of that. So I say all that to say, don't lead with AI. Many students, I think they enjoy it for the convenience side of the house, but they want a relationship when they're making such a big big ticket item purchase.
That's why it's a sandwich, right? Is a human AI
Exactly. It's in the
human,
middle.
or yeah, you gotta start with a human.
Exactly.
I love that nugget you shared of including more questions in the application that can then help you like now with AI you can personalize so much more without having to lean on your teams. So the more you can um, grasp in that application in terms of fears, hesitations, barriers, those are all things that obviously with EdSights we also ask students throughout their journey. But if we have some of that information in the application already, AI can help you scale that personalization so much more when it comes to messaging. Um, so that was a good tip. All right. Well, pivoting a little bit, I'm curious. Oh, pivoting. Any more comments or I just heard someone go off.
Carolina, one thing I did want to touch on, you talked about
Yeah,
like injecting bringing on new technology. And I think a shift that a lot of schools need to make is they assume the new technology is going to solve their old problems, whereas a lot of
exactly.
times it's you need to reinvent the process, then inject the new technology because people layer on new technology on the old processes, and all you're getting is the same results faster and quicker and more of
Yeah,
it.
100%. That's what we're seeing as well is the technology is not going to figure out the process for you. It can scale it, it can automate it, it can expedite it, make it more personalized, but it's not going to be able to decide the process for you. Um, and so a lot of times it does force some of these conversations, maybe sooner than institutions were ready for, or it kind of brings folks together and it does force you to have to make some decisions around workflow or process if you are implementing some of these, which would have to happen at some point. But it is a lot of, I would say, change management as well, and business operations and workflow rather than like a technology problem in many cases. Um, which takes me to my next question, which is very much around change management and how you're approaching that. I think a lot of institutions are investing in new CRMs, agents, bots, data infrastructures, and oftentimes the challenges are less so about the actual technology and the integrations, and it's really more around aligning stakeholders, getting people in a room to talk about responsibilities, and as we just mentioned, process as well. So I'm just curious, how are you all thinking about building that buy-in and that change management culture that can support those investments? Because we know that the investment in technology alone isn't gonna do it. It does need the people that are um, to make it work. And so I'm curious how you all are approaching that.
The way I approach it is, enrollment management is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. And, you know, colleges, universities, colleges are unfortunately often set up to work in silos, and students don't see the lines that we see. So I think from a change management perspective, when we onboard new ways of doing things or new technologies, you can't do that in a silo either, and then just expect everyone to latch onto it and do what you got to do. So, you know, I think most of us, I mean, this platform allows us to work with students from kind of a case management perspective, if you will, with the portal and being able to tag students in groups and things like that. And I think where it becomes the most effective is when on the back end or the user end, you also have those care teams set up and all the different aspects of navigating the college experience administratively, especially with financial aid, with your student life, with your registration, all of those things. They need to be part of those teams, and they need to know what students are tagged to, are having issues that are related to what they do on a day in, day out basis. So, when we talk about who's responsible for the student, it's never one individual, it's never one office, because students come to us with multifaceted challenges. Um, Although most of them say finance is their challenge, but we always know it's more than just finance, because I believe that if a student really wants to make it happen, we should be able to help them find a way to make it happen from a financial perspective. Not always, but I think sometimes that's an easy way to disengage, So anyway, coming at it from that kind of mindset, these on the front end, the students, I call them melt risks, so being able to use the tools from a predictive modeling standpoint, working those in the middle. That's not just admissions counselors working those students. Financial aid office knows who those students are. Our student success folks know who those students are, that we're trying to shepherd through the process. So, by bringing in, and it's a lot of work. I mean, it takes a lot of attention, but at the end of the day, what's the goal here? The goal is to help students not only get here, but get through here. So if that mindset does exist, then that makes these kind of partnerships much easier to forge, especially if it all reports to the same area, but that's not always the case. And the best way to get buy-in is to show results. So that's when I onboard things like this. Luckily, I have an experience of successful results, and that makes it pretty easy for folks to buy in. When you don't have that, you gotta play upon the case studies and having the conversations with those who have used these kind of tools and these kind of approaches that best match your kind of institution.
Yeah. Yeah, change is scary. The approach, and I think Paul, you're doing some of this as well too, is starting with the bottom up and sell the vision. I think we as VPs or chiefs need to be fantastic salespeople. We sit in meetings so our employees don't have to. We advocate for them to get the best technology to make their job easier and make them more efficient, more effective. I think that through conversations with staff and being able to find out what their frustrations are, their choke points, and connecting that tech to the solution is a good W. It's a good way to win and show them how it can take some things off their plate and allow them to do things that they enjoy more of. With AI, really removing that common myth around it and showing how it's going to enhance instead of replace. I think that's really important, just about, headlines in the media and how they're perpetuating AI as to really take jobs from a number of people, especially ones in high admin load positions. And then it's really important to have staff to be a part of that implementation and redesign process. They're in the trenches already, so they know a lot that people at the VP level don't see. So I think it's important to them to use them already, but also being a part of creating change creates that buy-in at that level. And then lastly, Paul, you hit the nail on the head with this as well too. You've got to stand on the mountaintop and shout the successes that you're having from that technology, because that creates future buy-in too.
Awesome. And then final two questions. One is, you've touched upon this a little bit, but how do you create alignment between admissions, financial aid, advising, student services? Sometimes it's, if they're all under one person, it's a little bit easier, but still things break down, right, as a student moves through the journey. And so where are you seeing that chain break a little bit more? And then how do you create that shared view and that shared student experience, so it doesn't feel fragmented as they move through?
I think Paul hit the nail on the head with the silos. Silos kill, and I think where we're at is, how do you maintain the structure of people coming together and giving people the opportunity to get together? And Paul talked about care teams. At a place like Clinton, our care team is an office of one or two. So it's fairly easy, if you're reporting to the same VP, to get those care teams together to kind of walk through that process and create the opportunity for the staff to participate in that change, to make the big decisions, and that are going to help the students longer term. So I really think that, when we're looking at it, we have weekly meetings, making sure we're working through each process through the course of the year. The focus may shift through the course of the year from one office to the other, but all hands on deck, many hands are going to make lighter work through the process.
Awesome. And then one final question for this group. As we wrap up, if enrollment leaders on this call are walking away with one thing that they could do differently in the next 90 days to make an impact. What is one concrete, actionable change that you suggest they make to either listen or respond to students' needs? And what would you share as a piece of advice?
Okay. I think one easy lift, I hit on this earlier, add one concern question, one motivation question to your application. I mean, it really gives you the context to customize the perceived value and the potential concerns or objections that may surface later on in the journey. That's
Such
an
a good
easy
one.
lift.
Such an
Yeah.
easy lift. So much you can do with that one with any technology. Yeah, everyone should just go back and do that today. Anything else?
I would say, this might sound harsh. Never let a good crisis go to waste. I mean, we are all in, I would imagine everyone sitting on this call today is struggling in one way, shape, or form from an enrollment perspective. And I tell you, and I keep choosing um, challenging situations in my role because I believe in the kind of colleges that I work at. And but there's a reason why things aren't going well. And so unearthing the why and giving very applicable strategies and tactics to help move the needle. Um, it's a lot easier when there is I hate to say this, but is there a desperation sometimes of some point? Um, and it's so, you don't want to create panic, but there's a reason why we need to make some changes, and here's the proof in the pudding how this can help us. And so when I'm back to then leaning into bringing on this kind of technology, I just think you have to be very realistic and very transparent about what's going on from an enrollment perspective and the ways that we can help, curb the declines. And this is I think obviously I'm a firm believer in this, but because I've seen it work time and time again. This is it's not new anymore, but to a lot it still is a new way to tackle these kind of issues.
I've been at Clinton for about a year, and came into the situation like Paul did. We're struggling through a lot. We're in our infancy of trying to crawl back, and we've seen some success, some early successes, and I think that's been good. But I think my advice is use the tools you have, learn how to use them so that you can allow your people to work smarter and not harder. And I think we spin our wheels a lot, making people work a lot harder than they need to. If we can use the tools, and EdSights has been a fantastic tool for us. So, use those tools to allow people to work.
Awesome. Well, appreciate these tips, and thank you to the audience for joining. And yeah, appreciate the great conversation. It was such a pleasure having you all, and thanks for sharing all the insights. I think we answered all the questions as they came in the Q&A. So thank you for sharing those. And happy 4th of July. Enjoy the fireworks, the boating, the yard work, the friends, the spouses, all the things. And thank you so much, Justin, Tom, and Paul, for all the insights and for the great conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Happy 4th, everyone.
Happy 4th.
Happy 4th.